Your time. It's great to see you.
Great to see you.
I'd like to kick it off with this budget deadlock that you've got going on over the debt ceiling. The Republicans are still, as far as I can tell, suggesting a sort of stopgap solution to get you past the August 2nd deadline. Do you, along with other members of your party, reject that? It looks like the president is rejecting it too.
Yeah, I do not think that is preferable. I think there is enough goodwill and good ideas right now on the table that we can get the parties together to create a compromise and raise the debt ceiling in an effort to make our economy healthier. And I think that we can get this done. And one of the things that I'm fighting for is I just want to make sure that if we make these tough choices, that it's a shared sacrifice, that we're all coming to the table. And if we're doing the tough work on discretionary spending and on entitlement reform, that we also must make sure revenues is part of it. And I think that for all those wage earners who earn more than $1 million, that they take a higher tax rate, a rate of 39%. And I think that will be a greater shared sacrifice, and that will help us tremendously in closing these budget gaps.
Entitlement reform, which would entail cuts to Medicaid and Medicare, is that something that you could see yourself voting yes on?
Well, I want to strengthen Medicare and Medicaid, and there's a lot of waste and fraud in the system, duplicative care. Even in the cover of the New York Times, they were talking about how CAT scans were routinely done twice. There's a lot of work that we can do to streamline and to make sure that Medicare and Medicaid are not only solvent, but stronger. And those are the kinds of reforms that I think are worthwhile and ones that people are very much willing to focus on and get done.
But if the president does come to you, because it sounds like at this point he's saying, let's put entitlement cuts on the table in an effort to get the Republicans to come on board, and he comes to the Democrats and says, will you vote for not just reforms but cuts, actual cuts to these programs, which have been so significant to you politically, including the Kathy Hochul win, will you be able to go along with that?
I'll have to see whatever proposal the president or the leadership comes up with. But my preference for any kind of compromise is that it must include revenues. And this is really important because we all have to pay our fair share. We all have to share in the sacrifice. And so when we have allocated so much savings for those who earn more than $1 million, it's just not fair, and we need to have everyone at the table. So I'm hopeful that we can make sure tax policy is part of it, and we can look at the estate tax, we can look at those earning more than $1 million to have a slightly higher rate of taxes, which was the same rate we had under the Clinton administration, where people did fabulously well and our economy was booming. So these are not difficult tax rates for people to be able to live with. They're reasonable and fair. And so I'm hopeful that whatever discussion the president and whatever decisions the president reaches and whatever compromise he can reach with Speaker Boehner, that it's a shared sacrifice.
How much of your concern is actually political? I mean, to take the Medicare issue off the table, as I mentioned, it was a huge piece of the win in that special election that Kathy Hochul surprised everybody and managed actually to win in a Republican district.
But Liz, to be specific, what Kathy Hochul talked about in her race was an idea that the Republican Congress suggested that would have changed Medicare as we know it.
Right.
It would have taken Medicare and really put it at risk to the decisions of insurance companies. And that was an idea that when seniors heard about it, they rejected. They said, I do not want decisions to be made by the insurance companies. When I'm retiring and I want to make sure I have my basic health care needs met, they don't want that in question. They don't want to have to find coverage or see if everything's covered that they need. They want Medicare as the safety net that it is for basic health care when you're a senior or when you're in a certain at-risk population. So I think it's so important that we strengthen Medicare. And that's what Kathy talked about in her race, that her priority was to strengthen, not change it as we know it, not put it at the whims of the insurance industry. And so those kinds of cuts and changes are absolutely unacceptable. And so it just depends what they put on the table. And we'll look at it. We'll look at everything.
Speaking of Kathy Hochul, actually, you were an early supporter of hers, and she's since credited you and the support that you gave her in helping her to convince some Democrats who maybe weren't so convinced that she actually could pull off what she managed to do, winning in a GOP district. And you are now trying to translate this into getting more women, like Kathy Hochul, to run. You've started this organization called Off the Sidelines.
Liz, we lost you. Are you there?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second.
You're back
got
in.
me?
You're back on
okay.
now.
So
Yep.
you've got this off the sidelines effort. You're trying to get more women involved. Could you tell us how
Yes.
that's going to work? You took a little bit of a hit today in the Buffalo News because it's not a campaign committee. It's just a website that's asking for solicitations to your own personal campaign committee.
And what it really is an awareness campaign, and it's a call to action. Because, Liz, we are at a time, the first time in 30 years, where the percentage of women represented in Congress actually went down. And that is shocking just 2 years after Secretary Clinton, as our candidate for president, put those 18 million cracks in that glass ceiling. So that is alarming and concerning. And so what I'm trying to do is create a call to action to inform women that decisions are being made every single day in Washington that they will want to be part of, that these are decisions that affect them. So whether it's an issue of Social Security or Medicare and Medicaid, or an issue of affordability of daycare or national security or tax policy, that their voices need to be heard because it's going to affect them. And frankly, when women's voices are heard, the decisions that are made are better decisions.
But just to be,
I can give you endless examples of that.
Senator, I'm going to run out of time soon, and I want to let you go. But just to be clear, is this eventually going to be its own PAC, or is it just supporting you and then thereby?
It's just part of my campaign. It's part of what I do as a senator. It's part of what I do as a candidate. We're going to travel all across New York and do off-the-sidelines events. We're going to go all across the country and do off-the-sidelines events.
Gotcha.
Because it's part of who I am, what I believe in, and what I think is necessary for this country to move forward. The biggest issue today, Liz, is the economy. #1 issue, no matter where you go. And if women were part of these decisions, one of the things they would care a lot about, that they would want action on, is fair pay. For every dollar a man earns, a woman earns 78 cents. And most families are double wage earning families. So that's affecting every single American family, that women aren't paid their fair share. Also, every single issue that's being debated affects them. And so I want to hear women's voices more, because not only does it let me do a better job, but it will encourage more women to be running, and more women to be voting, and more women to being heard in their local districts, in their local states.
Okay. Senator, thanks very much. We'll keep an eye out for those events. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, Liz.